Thank you, Omeo, the welcoming city, the city of humanity, and thank you, Sweden, the land of Nobel, the land of Alfred Nobel. Thank you, the people who are all here around us to commemorate with us the young girls who were killed in a deadly attack whose only problem was that we were seeking education. Today's manifestation is part of the global demonstration which is happening now, currently, in more than 100 cities all over the world, starting from here, from Sweden to London, to New York, to Canada, and all over the world, Europe, America, Asia, and everywhere in the world, millions of people are sharing their sentiments and their feelings today with us, with Hazaras, and with the people who have been genocided and who have been killed since decades and decades and decades, and it never stopped. Today, somehow, I can say the whole world is standing with us. All the cities are live now. The Nobel Prize winners, the popular figures, over 6 million tweets, and many organizations are all gathered here, and they're all shouting to the human being, to the UN, to the governments, and to the humanity that stop Hazara genocide. Please shout after me. Stop Hazara genocide.
Stop Hazara genocide.
And why we are here? For those who has less information or maybe no information about the Hazaras in Afghanistan, Hazara community was a big community in Afghanistan over 100 years back. But now, unfortunately, they are not as big as it was in the past. In 1980s, it's very easy to talk here and to say here, but in 1980s, 62% of Hazara community were massacred, they were enslaved, they were sold, and they were depopulated. And they lost their lands, their lives, their families, and their everything. And only less than 38% remained, and they continued their hardship and very bad life in Afghanistan. The systematic killings never stopped. It continues to date. Under the Taliban in 1990s, for those who are not aware, it's the second time that the Taliban is capturing the country. For the first time, it occurred in 1990s. In 1990s, there was at least 9 massacres, 9 mass killings of Hazaras in different cities all over Afghanistan. In one example, only 15,000 people were killed in Mazar-e-Sharif city in a number of killing combined by the soldiers and troops of Taliban in that time. So it's not easy. And in the past 20 years, unbelievably, Hazaras have endured about 300 target killings. The killings were occurring in the schools, in the religious centers, in the social gatherings, in the educational gatherings, in the cultural gatherings, and amongst the mass people in the bazaar here and there and everywhere. The last example that will not be the least and that will not be the last for sure, I'm sure, it was happened on 30th September 2022. It's just weeks back. College Educational Center. The young girls, all of them were below 20. They were all there to seek for education and to go for education, nothing else. Suddenly an explosion occurs and blown up the educational center. And more than 53 underage girls the girls below 20 years old, they dies, and their families, their fathers, mothers, and neighbors, they cannot recognize the bodies of their girls and their daughters. It's very sad. It's very sad, people. It's even sad to say. And how we can feel those mothers, those fathers, those families, and those who have belonging with the same community. The happening remained with hundreds of other wounds, the people who got seriously wounded, and very sadly every day 1 or 2 of them are dying, and the dead number of the girls are increasing every day by 1 or 2. It's very sad. It will not be the lost. And why we are here? Another question. You know, people, in Afghanistan, we had big other minority groups like the Jews, the Jewish society in Afghanistan, and the Hindu society in Afghanistan. Just 20 years back, 30 years back, 50 years back, these communities were relatively big and very peaceful and was contributing to the country's peace and prosperities. But what's happening now? The Jewish society cleansed in Afghanistan. There was one Jew man, Jewish person was living in one of Afghanistan city. He also flew and he left Afghanistan totally cleansed. And Hindu society, they were a big society all over Afghanistan. Very sadly, 2 weeks back, we saw in the news that the last group of Hindus flew from Afghanistan, cleansed, totally cleansed, lost everything, their lands, their properties, their homes, their businesses and everything, and they wash out, swept off. And they lost their meaning as a community there in Afghanistan. And now, maybe there is a question that why Hazaras are not cleansed so far? Why they are not swept off from Afghanistan so far? I can tell you, Hazaras were a very big community, and it still is a big community, a community of over 10 million people. They cannot kill the 10 million people in 2 years or 3 years or 5 years. But if the humanity and if the United Nations and if the related organizations and the nations keep not to seeing the massacre, the systematic killings and the genocide in Afghanistan, very sadly and very unfortunately, now the process